Hello, I'm Darrell Gunter, your host for Leadership on WSOU 89.5 FM and streaming on the net at WSOU.net. Well, today we're so happy to have as our in-studio guest, Miss Lisa Peskin. She's the CEO of the Business Development University and the author of the Sales Success Workbook. Lisa, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here, Daryl. It's a pleasure.
I met you at an event where you were a speaker for Keystone Bank, and I said, well, I gotta have her on my program because she's really hitting on all of the key success criteria and best practices for sales. But before we jump into that, could you share with our audience a little bit about your education and background?
Sure. Well, started as wanting to be a doctor. My dad told me, follow your passion, do what you love to do. And I knew I loved helping people, went through all the pre-med classes up at Penn State, only to realize I would have been a terrible doctor, finished with a psychology degree, thought I could help people that way. But I ended up going back for my MBA. And what I realized in my life, the way I really feel like I'm making an impact on this world is helping individuals, teams, and companies to be more successful. So ended up getting into sales after finishing with a marketing degree, and just now I think it's the best career out there.
So, how did you go from being a doctor, psychologist, into sales, even though it involves a lot of psychology? How did you make that connection?
So I got my MBA in marketing. And I figured I just need to do sales for a little bit because I thought it was under the umbrella of marketing. So I figured I'm just going to do it for a couple years. Wasn't really successful right from the start, but once I got the hang of it, I'm like, this is the best career out there.
And it's good to hear you share that success didn't come right away, but once you figured it out, it was like it's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? It feels right. What happened? What was the experience that when you said, "Aha, yeah, I feel comfortable with this now."
So that's a fantastic question. And I could remember the exact time that it was a game changer for me. So my first couple years in sales, I sold telephone systems starting in 1986. And then I cut my teeth over at ADP. And I was there in 1989 to 2001. And after a year at ADP, and that's a sales machine, weekly quotas. What have you done for me lately? Stack rank you every Tuesday night, have to stand up in front of all the other salespeople and say what you sold. My 1 year anniversary, I quit. I got a job with Donnelly Directory, convinced myself since I know how to draw, I'm going to design yellow page ads. My boss at the time said, Lise, you are making a big mistake. He said, I'm going to make you a deal. You stick around 3 more months. If you're not successful after 3 months, I'm going to help you find a job. And then he gave me the best piece of advice I've ever gotten in sales in my entire life. And it was as simple as this: Lisa, stop worrying so much about the number. Focus on doing the right number of the right activities right. So I went from I got to get this sale to I don't care if I'm getting the sale because my boss is going to help me find a job in 3 months. But I focused on doing the right activities in the right way. And lo and behold, I started selling like a crazy woman. And I finished in the top 8% of 2,000 people that year and never looked back.
Wow. Wow. So for you, it was letting go of I gotta be successful, I gotta be successful to really just doing the best practices.
There's
And
a fine line. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there is a fine line that we go from pushing and trying to fit round pegs in square holes. It is a numbers game, that's for sure. But it's also helping and not selling and knowing the formula. It is a math problem. Sales is a numbers game. And once we understand what factors play into that math equation, then all you need to do is hit the right numbers.
well, I want to hit on something because my students are going to have to watch this video. And you said something that is so key. It's about helping. Talk to me about the importance of demonstrating that you're there to help someone, not sell someone.
So nobody in this world wants to be sold anything. So I think we've got to stop trying to sell our product or our service. In business to business sales, but even B2C sales, if we figure out a way to help an individual or a company with your product or service, you'll make the sale. So if we look at it from a totally different perspective and just figure out how you're going to help them get from here to here. So it is a consultative approach. It's what I've done for the past 38 years. But I truly believe that if we could find some ways to help, we're going to make the sale.
And so you figure that out. You're being very successful. You said the top 8% out of 2,000 people. And then what was the next step for your career after that? Where did the business development university begin and your individual sales quota end?
So there was a little thing in between. So after carrying a bag for 5 years over at ADP, I always wanted to show the women at ADP that you could also be a leader. And so I became a sales leader and had a team of salespeople. And eventually I was promoted to vice president of sales, where I was responsible for 40 sales individuals and 4 teams. And you could just imagine the pressure. There was only 5 women in my position across the entire company at the time. And I was trying to break that glass ceiling, trying to show women that you could be a mom and you could be an executive. But what transpired after 12 years of weekly quotas, I realized I don't know my daughter's first words or first steps. She's 27 years old now. And that's what the difference was. And when I decided to leave ADP and start my own company, which was Peskin Associates at the time, which was a little bit of a fib because there was no S, it was just me. But that I had my dad's words in the back of my head saying, someday start your own business and follow your passion. And so that's what I did.
So with that, you wait a minute, but before we go into Peskin and Associates, you were VP of sales managing 40 people. That's a huge team.
It was. And what I realized back in the 90s, that my forte and my passion was if someone was underperforming, how do I get them to hit their numbers? If they were just average, can I make them good? If they're good, can I make them great? If they're great, can I turn them into a superstar? And it's baseball season. We've got the World Series coming up. So here, this is something I believe to my core. There's not a big difference between a 280 hitter and a 330 hitter. It's only 5 hits for every 100 at bats. So back in the 90s, I came up with a methodology that I called triage. And I taught my managers, and I still work to this methodology to this very day, is determining what 3 areas that, if improved upon, will have the biggest impact on this individual or this team's performance. Because if you could figure out those 3 areas that are going to have the biggest impact, you could drive the number. And as sales leaders, we have a one-line job description. All we need to do is maximize the performance and the potential of our direct reports. So focusing on the 3, we might uncover 10, but nobody could focus on 10. Focus on the 3 that are going to have the biggest impact on performance.
Wow. And based upon that, what were the three most common areas that you identified that folks needed to improve upon?
Well, actually, I'll give you a real life example. It happened in 2015. And anyone who's listening, please connect with me on LinkedIn. And you'll go through my recommendations, go all the way down to 2015. You'll see the woman, Sarah, that talked about what happened. So Sarah was out in St. Louis, and I get a call from her manager, and he said, we bought a 9-year-old company. I've got a sales rep, and she doesn't know how to sell. She doesn't know how to close. I want to send her to your 2-day sales training class. My dad always said, put your head on the pillow at the end of every day. So I'm like, what are you going to schlep her from St. Louis over to Philadelphia? What if this is not a training issue? Let me just talk to her for an hour. Let me see if I can figure it out. After an hour, it was perfectly clear. Number one, all her next steps were loosey-goosey. So if someone said they're making a decision next week, she goes, I'll call you next week. They don't pick up the phone. Number two, she went into presentation mode before she found out what they cared about. So we had to switch the process. So she had to do her discovery and find out key information before she went and presented any solutions. But the third was so important. She was selling a database of physicians to hospitals for $18,000. And every hospital is like, I'm not spending $18,000 on a database. So I suggested she ask two more questions. How many openings do you have for how many months? One opening is $100,000 of lost revenue. Two openings for 2 months is $400,000 of lost revenue. When she started putting her $18,000 solution in the context of the $400,000 problem, she started selling like a crazy woman. She finished number one in the quarter for the first 2 quarters of 2015, hit her annual quota that August, and doubled her revenues. And I'm talking to her and I'm like, Sarah, I'm so glad I was able to help you out. She said, you changed my life. Literally, I don't even know what Sarah looks like. It was before COVID. It was bi-weekly conversations for 1 quarter, and I changed her life making three little tweaks. The loosey-goosey next steps, having the sales process, a hole somewhere in the sales process, and not putting your solution in the context of what they care about.
That is brilliant. That is brilliant. And the triage. Now, have you trademarked that? Because I heard you mention that before when I was attending the session that you present. I said, that's a good thing.
Well, thank you for the suggestion, and probably I should do that along with my, squeeze the lemon. So yes, I'm gonna have to look into that.
But let's talk about you know what? I'm ashamed to say that when I did the interview guide, I did not include the lemon, and I have a lemon on my desk that you gave me. So let's talk about the lemon.
Well, the lemon is how I try to live my life. And a lot of people think it's about making lemonade out of lemons, and it's not. And I'm actually quite good at that because my father dealt with a lot of adversity. His first heart attack was 39. He was a double amputee when he passed away at the age of 70. But squeeze the lemon is, how do I get the most juice out of my life? How do I get the most out of every day? How do I get the most out of every conversation? So in our personal life, you hit the microwave for 5 minutes. What else can you do in those 5 minutes? Or I'm walking up the stairs. What can I pick up? Or I'm going for a walk. Let me notice all the trees that have three different colors. That's squeezing the lemon. But in our business lives, squeeze the lemon is one of your clients says, oh my God, Daryl, you're awesome. Instead of just saying, oh, thank you so much, squeeze the lemon would be, oh, thank you so much. Could I ask you the biggest favor? Could you take what you just said and put it into a LinkedIn recommendation? That would mean the world to me. So the two words that go along with my lemon, let's be purposeful in everything we do. Let's just do activity for activity's sake and go check, check, check. And the corresponding word is accomplishment. So there's a direct correlation between the activities that we do and the results that we get. But if we do the activities without a purpose, we're going to accomplish less. So that's squeeze the lemon. And when I was working with a local energy company, Pico, in the Philadelphia area, I was out in Salt Lake City, and I was training their call center. And the woman says, we got to make sure our folks are squeezing the lemon. So she used my metaphor, how intended. So if we're talking to them about picking up their old refrigerator, we should be talking to them about the rebate for an energy efficient refrigerator. So one more thing, one more drop of juice. That's the concept.
Wow, that is great. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Miss Lisa Peskin, CEO of Business Development University and the author of the Sales Success Workbook. And we're talking about the best practices of professional sales. And she said a word in our first segment, consultative sales, because we're here to solve problems. We're here to improve productivity. So let's talk about your other brilliant thing that you've added, which is the Business Development University. Tell us about that.
So Business Development University was rebranded in 2010 after I took on a partner at the time. And it was all about helping individuals, teams, and companies drive the number. I'm a numbers girl, and that's all I think about at the end of every day. Over COVID, and you just mentioned it, I authored a sales success workbook. And I could have titled it what I wish someone told me in 1986 when I started in sales, because I feel like I needed to make every mistake in the book, which I did. And I put a lot of and uh, um tools and things that I learned along the way. I try to put it all into one easy to use workbook. And it's what I use for my training sessions, whether it be my public training sessions or my private. And I'm actually writing a follow up. It's going to be a sales leader success workbook. But in the short term, I'm putting together a sales leader toolbox because I find a lot of sales leaders aren't doing the fundamentals of leading that is critical to driving sales success.
Mm. And so, of course, we're going to have you back on to talk about that book. But when do you anticipate that you will publish the Sales Leadership Success Workbook?
So the toolbox is going to come first, and then the workbook's going to come after. So if at the end of next year, I would get the whole book done, but the toolbox I'd love to get done by June
Okay,
at the very latest.
very good. And so, you know, I enjoy your energy. And I gotta assume that this energy comes through in your training program. Tell us about your training programs. Are they bespoke? Of course, they got some common components. Is it 1 day, 2 day? Tell us about your program.
So there's two types of programs that we offer. We offer public training, which I'm going to be doing a session next week, and it covers the book soup to nuts in 2 days, right? And it's with a group of around 8 to 10 people, very interactive, and it's for all those folks that are either new to sales or those folks that have never had formal sales training or those folks that are struggling a bit and they need to go back to the fundamentals. But then a big thing of what we do is we go into companies and do customized training. So a couple weeks ago, I did some customer service training, trying to teach the customer service people how to really sell more and help their clients in new ways. I went up to New York and did a training for an association. I've been working with them over 10 years, but it's all customized. So the key for training, and I've sat on so many boring training sessions, is to create aha moments using stories, analogies, examples, and giving people tools that are very easy to use, easy to implement. And then we find ways to blend our learning so that there's the proper reinforcement.
Wow, that is awesome. That is awesome. And so when you think about that, your program, you have some common components. Um, how do you make it so it doesn't for you it becomes exciting? It's not like okay, I'm singing the same song again, but I'm singing the song with a lot of joy.
It's so interesting. And I don't think I've ever been asked that. You know what? I got to tell you, I could tell the same story over and over and over again. And I'm still excited about it because these are things that in my life have made an impact. And I love sharing those. And quite honestly, it's the stories, the examples, the analogies that get people to remember and make things easy to use and easy to remember and giving them tools. A lot of people say that they keep my workbook next to them, it's their little Bible and it covers everything so they can look at, oh, I'm going to visit a client, let me go look at the client visit checklist, or I'm going to talk to a center of influence, I better look at the networking visit checklist, or I've got a brand new prospect, well, let me look at this one pager and it's going to tell me exactly how to run a sales call. So those kind of tools, not only what needs to be done but what needs to be said, I've tried to really simplify it to make it easy to implement.
Wow. And in your training, do you also recommend different CRM systems?
Well, there's certain CRM systems that I think are awesome. And so I mean, Salesforce everybody knows about, but I love HubSpot, Drive. So I don't think we all need to get the whole thing, and sometimes it's overkill. The implementation of CRM systems is one of the hardest aspects of leadership, but it's not my focus area. So I do have partners that help me in those areas and that I would recommend to others.
One thing and that I've seen over the course of my life is when you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen with a CRM system, and cooks come and cooks go, and next thing you know, I thought that was chicken noodle soup. Oh, this tastes like alphabet soup.
Absolutely. And the same goes with sales playbooks. What is shocking to me is that most sales leaders in most companies don't have a sales playbook. And everybody's on a different page, doing things differently, measured in different ways. Oftentimes, managers are managing their folks in different ways. And so, helping companies look at things from this kind of perspective and understanding all the things that they need to have in place. I have one company I'm working with, they had no incentive systems established. So, everybody was kind of just doing their thing with no incentive to do any more than they were currently doing. And just by putting in some incentive and recognition systems and putting some processes in place, it's been a game changer.
Wow, no incentive. Oh, wow. And what was your business performance, if I may ask, with no incentive plan?
Flat, flat, or even worse.
On that.
And to me, when you look at sales, like I said, it's an equation, but our revenues are comprised of three components. It's your repeat business, it's penetrating your existing customers and net new business. And the middle category is so critical. And they're not having white space matrix conversations, they're not having share of the wallet conversations, they're not seeing other opportunities within their existing client base.
For my audience, could you define white space matrix?
I'd be happy to. So if a company offers three different services and a client or customer is only taking advantage of one, then the two other areas that they're not taking advantage of, if we did have a spreadsheet, would be where the opportunities lie.
It's like it's almost like the Blue Ocean book that was the early 2000s, where you're going selling where there's no one there, or you're providing a need for them. Very nice, very nice.
And
So
it's so easy to squeeze the lemon and get one more product category, one more opportunity by asking one more question. Sometimes it's just one more question.
one more good question. And what are your thoughts about the pre-call analysis before you go out on the call?
Critical. The first step in any meeting is building business rapport, transitioning to confirmation of time, asking their agenda, setting your agenda. So the building business rapport, a lot of times when we're in sales, our prospect treats us less than they are. We want to stay like this. And if we take a very consultative approach, there's no reason why we shouldn't be like this, right? So we've got to make sure that we establish a relationship. And I want someone to know me as Lisa Peskin and not Lisa Peskin that's trying to sell them anything. So I try to connect on a personal basis and let them know what my intentions are. It's about helping and not selling. And I've taken that approach all my life. And I used to use the words, I don't really consider myself a salesperson. I consider myself a payroll consultant. I would say that all the time. And I'm just trying to figure out if I have some ideas that might be helpful for you.
Beautiful, beautiful. And let's talk about performance coaching. What are some of the best practices that a new manager can leverage to be a better coach?
So, in my viewpoint, I look at two different things, and it just so happens there's fives in both of them. But I look at the five rights. Do I have the right number of the right people doing the right number of the right things right? So I might not have enough people. I might have the wrong people. They might not be doing enough activities. They might be doing the wrong activities, or they might be doing the right activities wrong. So as leaders, we need to go 15 feet up and look at that. The other thing is, there's five ways that we can influence our direct reports. We better be doing regularly scheduled one-on-one meetings. I find a lot of sales leaders are doing this on a quarterly basis, semi-annual basis, not structured basis. It's the most critical time that you could be developing your direct reports. They don't have structured team meetings. They don't know how to interact with their folks on an ad hoc basis. They don't have joint appointments with them where they can provide them feedback, and they're not doing the proper training to help them sharpen the saw.
Wow. And so, in your experience, have you found when folks are not doing these best practices, was it that the company that hired them assumed that they had that skill, or they didn't really know what skills that they needed? Like you might have a CEO who I've solved that sales problem. I've hired Bob, and Bob's going to turn things around. But meanwhile, Bob's not performing because the CEO doesn't know that Bob's doesn't know what the questions to ask.
There's a couple key things here. And in fact, I just developed a tool that CEOs need to be asking their sales leaders. But there's a couple factors here. One is the Peter principle. A lot of sales leaders are successful salespeople that get promoted to a leadership position, and oftentimes to a level of inadequacy. So we got to look at who we're putting in a leadership. My very worst position for companies, and companies use this position all the time, is a player coach. They put somebody that's great in sales and they start mentoring others. And now they're torn, but there's no leadership. And oftentimes CEOs say, oh, I hired a very seasoned salesperson. They don't need training and development. And when I was doing it, nobody taught me this. I figured it out on my own. But sales is the most critical function within any company. And we got to be investing. I mean, doctors, lawyers, everybody, they have continuing education. Sales is a profession, and we need to sharpen the saw. And sometimes it's the little things that make a huge difference.
Right. Well, I want to make sure because we're about to come to a close. Um, how can someone get in touch with you? Uh, how can they contact you? Well, what is the best way?
So, the first thing I'd love you to do is to connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, we're businessdevelopmentuniversity.com. Check out our website. You could call me directly on my cell phone, 215-651-6977. I don't care if you call me or text me, but let's have a conversation. If I can figure out some ways to help you out, it would be my pure pleasure. And of course, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and all of that kind of stuff. But I'd like to just connect with you directly on LinkedIn, and let's see if we have some ideas that we could help one another.
And so, in closing, what what's the best quote that you can give our salespeople or sales leaders?
If you think you can or can't, you're right. And I did not come up with that quote. It's Henry Ford. But I think we got to get rid of that apostrophe T. A lot of it is our confidence level, and our confidence level comes from being prepared and not winging things and not having, a game plan. So if you think you can, you can't, or right. And then my other favorite one, which is Elisa Peskin, is always do the next step at the current step because it saves yourself a step. No loosey-goosey next steps. So make appointments for the presentation, make appointments for the decisions. Don't leave it up in the air.
Wow, well said. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Miss Lisa Peskin, who is the CEO of the Business Development University, as well as the author of the Sales Success Workbook. Lisa, thank you for coming on the program.
It's been so much fun. I think we could probably talk for hours and hours. So thank you so much for having me today.
You're very welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps it up this week on Leadership with Darrell W. Gunter on WSOU 89.5 FM and streaming on the net at WSOU.net. We want you to have a great day, but remember, leadership begins with you.